We are back at Bulova. We are in the Bulova archive. We're doing a collector series with John Carter, better known as Dappered Watch on Instagram, recently featured in Watchanista.
That's right.
His collection. And we're going to be looking at his watches. We are surrounded by some historic watches, some really beautiful watches that you could purchase. But today we're going to be talking about your watches in your collection. John, thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time to come here to the Empire State Building to talk about your watch collection.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I would say let's start with the IWC, in part because this is a piece that is really fun. I love the color of it. This is the release from a couple of years ago, the Pilot Chronograph in titanium, 41 millimeter, I believe. And it was a collaboration with the Petronas Mercedes F1 team. Mm-hmm. And the reason I want to start with this is because the first race of the F1 season is this coming weekend. Mm-hmm. So it's very much on my mind. And this is a piece that every time I look at it, every time I wear it, it makes me smile. And I happen to be a Mercedes fan as well.
Let's talk about Bulova. So this is a Bulova mill ships. This is a limited edition.
Yep, that's right. It's a limited edition, a reissue from a couple of years ago. I believe there were about 1,500 of them.
Okay.
It has an interesting history behind it. This is a reissue from a very limited set of, I believe, 50 that were originally made as part of Bulova's entry into the competition to win a Navy contract.
Right. So this is a watch that I actually own as well. This was, if you were interested in that story, I will link to that story and the review that I did for this watch. This is a limited edition. This is the Swiss version, so this gets a Sellita movement. They made a cheaper version, which has a Miyota movement. However, it looks exactly the same. Really, a very, very cool piece from Bulova. When they re-released this, I kind of went into a frenzy because I love this watch, and I think it's just one of the coolest watches that they've come out with in years. And today I have their Meteorite Lunar Pilot on.
That's a great piece as well.
I think is pretty awesome. So these two watches I think are just cool, and obviously both of them are in my collection. So thanks for bringing this. And I think that the water indicator on this dial is actually functional, although you probably don't want to find that out. What do you have on your wrist today?
So I'm actually wearing a piece that I've had for several years. It's a Glasuta Original, the Panamatic Lunar. This one is from about 2009, I believe. So the design is slightly different from what the current one looks like, but I fell in love with this in the early days of watch collecting for me. Mm-hmm. I just thought it was beautiful. I loved the sort of asymmetric design. And to this day, it's the only moon phase watch I have in my collection, but it's a special piece. And I probably don't wear it as often as I should, but today felt like a great opportunity to do so.
Awesome. Big date, moon phase, and the asymmetrical seconds and hours and minutes. Very good looking watch. These have always been very sort of underrated watches in the general German watchmaking community, and I think that's a really great example. The white, the silver, really beautiful. Let's go to a Rolex, which on my channel, you may or may not know, I don't feature many Rolex on my channel, and that's not because I don't love Rolex. I appreciate and love Rolex. I just don't like the shenanigans of Rolex. So I do give them a lot about that sort of stuff, but I gotta say, every time I see a Pepsi GMT, I am just, especially in the Jubilee. The Jubilee bracelet on this watch is hands down my favorite Jubilee, and also I don't have to say style afterwards.
Yeah.
Because when I make other reviews and they have a Jubilee style bracelet on it, I am required, otherwise Rolex comes after you, to say style. Anyway, so this is a genuine Jubilee bracelet, and I love the Jubilee. It really, it's so nice. This is just a beautiful watch.
It really is. I love this watch so much. So GMTs in general are my favorite complications. It's the complication that I use the most. So I have a special place in my heart for GMTs, and obviously this one it's an icon within that field. This is actually the first piece, and at the moment only piece in my collection on a Jubilee. And I have to say, I was blown away by it the first time I put it on, and just the comfort, the way it just sort of shaped to my wrist.
You're always reminded if you don't handle a Rolex on a regular basis, you're kind of reminded when you get one in hand, specifically for me, why they are so popular. Because when you hold it, it's a tank. It feels solid, well made. They're great watches. But speaking of well made and great watches, we have a Royal Oak here. This is a stainless steel version on the bracelet. This is the 400.
Yes.
I never know the numbers on these things. But again, tell us about this. This is gorgeous.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is 15400. So this was when they increased the case size from 39 millimeters to 41 millimeters. This one, actually, I bought it back in 2014. And I actually purchased it to commemorate a milestone in my professional career. And thankfully, that was before the market went as crazy as it has in the last several years for Royal Oaks. But it's a special piece to wear. And to this day, I still think it is the prettiest bracelet out there. Just the way it catches the light is incredible.
We actually had Jason from Complecto here, and we were talking about his. He has basically the exact same with the gray dial, so it's a little bit darker of a gray dial. And the bracelet on these are phenomenal. Just that's what makes the Royal Oak for me, is the bracelet. Really, it's so nice.
I agree with you.
Beautiful
completely.
watch.
Thank you.
Speaking of bracelets, and speaking of very, very thin watches, well, we actually didn't mention thin watches, but you have a Octo Finissimo.
Yes.
You're always at the opera. You're always doing something. You're always well dressed. Obviously, dappered watch, and that the theme here is that you are always very well dressed, and you're always doing something interesting. You guys follow him on Instagram. I will put a link to his Instagram down below. He has not only a great watch collection, but he's always doing something interesting. You're always invited to very interesting things, galas and stuff like that, and he's always very well dressed. So if you want tips on, obviously I have not taken any of your tips on dressing, but definitely check out his Instagram. But this is a chronograph, and there's something interesting about this chronograph. Why don't you talk about it?
Absolutely. So there are a few things that are interesting about it. First of all, it's not only a chronograph, but it's also a GMT. And it is, as far as I'm aware, it's still the thinnest version of a chrono GMT in the world. So this is, as you said, part of the Octo Finissimo line. They released this, I want to say it was in 2019 or 2020. And it was, I think it was GPHG nominated. It got a lot of accolades. For me personally, here again, I love a GMT. So I was instantly just drawn to the fact that they had that complication in it. But I'm a big fan of really well thought out, well executed design. And the entire Octo Finissimo collection, I think, is just, it's a fantastic, thoughtful design. And I think to the extent that it's not already, I think it's destined to become iconic. When they handed it to me and I put it on my wrist, I thought it was a fake because it's so lightweight. It's titanium. And I could not believe that this was the real thing until I turned it over and looked at the movement, and there it was. It's a spectacular piece. It's a lot of fun to wear, and it's one that you can put it on your wrist and you kind of forget that it's there until you happen to glance down.
This is a beast. And this is like, when you pick this up, it feels like you picked up 3 watches, not one. It's just an impressive piece of equipment, and it just feels like a sky dweller in I guess this is yellow gold, right?
It is in yellow gold, that's right.
Incredible.
Yeah, so this is my first gold Rolex and my first piece on the Oyster Flex, which I think makes it, for me at least, more wearable, because you're right, this watch has a lot of heft.
It's a lot.
It is unmistakable. Sort of, it's the polar opposite from the Octo Finissimo we were just talking about.
Right.
That one disappears on your wrist.
Right.
This one is ever present.
Right.
But it is extremely comfortable to wear because of the Oyster Flex bracelet. And I've always just really enjoyed the design of this watch. Here again, I guess consistent with a theme, I love dual time watches, GMT watches, and this one fits the bill. This is also the only annual calendar watch I currently have in the collection. But it's a piece that I enjoy wearing, but I feel like I have to be in the right mood and I have to be going to the right event or the right place for this to fit. Right. But when I have it on my wrist, I very much enjoy it. But It's not an everyday piece.
It's
I'll
an
put it that
attention
way.
getter,
It
and
is.
and that could be a good thing or a bad thing in New York City right now. But I mean, there's no denying it. Again, when you pick up a Rolex, especially something like this, the Sky Dweller, to say that this feels, it just feels incredible in your hand. I don't want to put it down. Like it really is. It's just. It is very heavy. It's really cool. Great looking watch too.
Thank you.
I'm a big fan of Vacheron. This is a dual time, and it's from Series 3. So I have a Series 3 as well. I have the World Time. This is the watch that I actually wanted, and I ended up buying the World Time because I got a better deal on it, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. But tell us about it.
Yeah, so the overseas collection, I have, especially the Series 3, I've always thought it was just really beautifully designed, beautifully executed. And especially the dual time version of it. Again, consistent with the theme that you're seeing in the collection. It's a great travel watch. The black dial in particular really caught my eye. I know the blue dial version is perhaps maybe it gets a little more attention.
Yep.
The black dial I love because the way it captures the light, especially the sunlight, is mesmerizing. Plus, my favorite color combination, just in general, is red and black. Mm-hmm. And so with the AM, PM, and the secondary time, the secondary hour indicator on that watch being red, or at least having a red tip, there's just something I find charming about that combo. So I love this watch. This is actually my most recent acquisition.
And again, a GMT, which fits into your theme here. So
exactly.
Very cool. This is the Chronomaster Sport.
That's right.
This is a 1/100th of a second chronograph?
Yes, that's right. Well, so it'll do 1/10 of a second.
1/10 of a second.
That's right.
So you got to wind it up for it to be able to do that.
Yes.
But yeah, so what happens here is that the second hand basically flies around the dial. This is something that basically there's only a few watch brands who do it, and Zenith do it pretty often on a lot of their watches, which I think is pretty cool. And again, this is a 40 millimeter watch with a ceramic bezel.
That's right, yeah, black ceramic bezel, and this is the white dial version. When they originally released it in 2021, there was a black dial and a white dial. Mm-hmm. Since then, Zenith has grown the collection, and they offer it in a number of different colors. But the white dial with the black ceramic bezel, I think, is just a really great look.
Yep.
And I love this watch. I think that I know that it sometimes draws comparisons to a Daytona, but I think it has an entirely different character. Mm-hmm. And I like the fact that it has a date window, which I know can be polarizing, especially given that it's at 4:30. And I like the exhibition case back as well. So I think it's a really well-designed piece that I very much enjoy wearing. And I think in the last several years, Zenith has been doing some really exciting stuff.
Awesome stuff. And last but not least, and by the magic of YouTube, because this was actually not sitting here just a moment ago, it was a watch that we forgot. This is an Apollo 8 Dark Side of the Moon in ceramic. I've made many videos about this watch on my channel because I really love it. And they just did a new version of it. So they've actually discontinued this version.
That's right, yeah, because this one has the non-master chronometer. Mm-hmm. This is the 1869 movement, so mm-hmm. It's the first generation.
Right.
It's my favorite version of the Speedy, and I know there are a lot of great ones, but this one I just fell in love with when I saw it. And I personally prefer the first generation to the new one that was just released.
Well, especially the price difference that they've kind of justified with or not really entirely justified with the new movement, and of course the Rocket secondhand.
It just looks like it's sort of a liquid black. It's so glossy. The attention to detail, even the laser ablating on the main plate to make it look like the surface of the moon, I just think is such a fun design detail, and it's just a great piece to own, and it's always a good conversation starter. Yeah. People always ask, "What's that on your wrist?" when I wear that piece.
This is around 43 millimeters, right?
It's I think 43 and a quarter, like it's a hair over 43.
So it's a large watch. It's not small, but I remember when they came out with this and they said that it was a limited run. So it technically was a limited run until they replaced it with the most recent version. But John, thank you so much for joining us here at the Bulova Archive and showing us your watches, showing us your Bulova, and just hanging out with us here today and taking a look at some of your watches. I really appreciate it. Again, Dappered Watch on Instagram. So if you are interested in seeing some cool watches, and of course someone who's very well dressed, and you're sick of looking at me, definitely check out his Instagram. And I appreciate you coming in. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.